If you're lucky, you may one day find yourself in your early 60s. Hopefully you're looking back on a successful career, a paid off house, maybe even put some kids through college. And at this stage, you think you'd be eager to jump out of bed for work every Monday, right? Let's be real. Your body probably aches head to toe. You dream about smashing your alarm clock, and you're tired of getting slapped around in pickleball by people that get to play every day. The last thing you probably look forward to is work, and all you can think about at this point is retirement. So if you're in your early 60s and manage to build $1 million investment portfolio, well, what does retirement look like? How possible is it? And are there any pain points or trade-offs? In this video, we'll work through an example of something that I've seen time and again in my career. We'll look at a couple in early retirement, and we'll try to determine, is it going to be beaches and umbrella drinks or ramen for the rest of their lives? Hey everybody, I'm Curtis Crossland of Subtle Crossland Wealth Advisors, and I help folks build more tax-efficient retirements. So let's get into it. One quick thing to keep in mind, the probability of any level of success depends on many different components. Not just where you live, but also a number of personal factors. I can't cover them all here, but it does highlight the need for everyone to run their own analysis. One of the bigger components of retirement that's going to have a big variance is going to be monthly spending. These targets vary a lot from person to person, and there is no one-size fits all. But if you look at something like the Bureau of Labor Statistics' most recent report, the average spending for the group 65 plus is $57,818, or just over $4,800 a month. Personally, this number feels a bit low, so for the sake of the example, we're going to start with an initial monthly spending target of $7,000. I'm sure there's a diversity of opinion on this. Some will say, hey, this is way too high. Some will say this is way too low, but this feels like a good middle ground. Let's dive into the example. So here we get to meet Joe and Jane. They're both 62, they're both still working, but now they're starting to ask that question, well, can we retire? And if not, are there any adjustments that can get us there? Let's start with a look at their assets and get a breakdown to see what it is they're working with. The first thing to notice is their net worth is about $1.7 million. And that's made up, as we can see here, Jane's 401k at $246,000. They've got some cash in the bank at $63,000. They do have a joint investment account at $86,000. Their primary home is worth $650,000. Joe's 401k over here at $619,000. And then his Roth IRA, he was able to build up to $48,000. Now, if we take out the home and the cash in the bank, that leaves them with roughly $1 million to work with. Next, we'll move over and we're going to take a look at their goals. And as we can see, they want to try to retire now, age 62, and then they want to have a $7,000 per month budget in retirement spending. And something else that we can see is that they do have a dream of being able to play golf around the country and do some traveling. So we want to add that in a budget of $10,000 per year, but they really only plan to do that for the first 10 years of retirement and then be done. I also think it's critical to add in some additional healthcare costs and then some additional retirement long-term care costs. The prevalence of these just simply grows as you get older, and the addition of the healthcare costs can help to defray some of the costs that's going to come from the insurance premiums until Medicare kicks in. Next, we're going to jump over and take a look at their income, and at least right now, they're currently still earning a salary, and we can see what they're making, but it should be noted that if they do retire, this income is going to go away, and so what they're going to have to live off of is going to be their investments and their general portfolio, and then eventually Social Security. And if we take a look at Social Security, at least for Joe at his full retirement age, he's going to earn a benefit of $3,000 per month. Now, because he is the higher earner of the two, he's going to delay until 70. And when we take a look at Jane's Social Security, her benefit at full retirement age works out to be $2,500 per month. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute, why don't they just take Social Security now? They're 62. Doesn't that just make things easier? We'll see later on how that isn't the case for this couple, but I've also explored this topic in a prior video looking at taking Social Security at 62 versus 70. And if you want to check out that video, I'll put a link in the description. You can check it out later. So just a quick recap. We have our couple here, both age 62. They want to retire right now. They want to spend $7,000 per month in retirement, and they have about $1 million in their investment portfolio. And the other thing to keep in mind is that they're going to be doing this with a combination of their investment portfolio and Social Security. So let's jump over and take a look and see what happens if they want to go ahead and try to retire. Well, we can see initially on the current plan, we have a 15% probability of success, but we really just need to get in under the hood. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the withdrawal rate of the plan itself. And as we can see, at least here in the early 60s up until 70, we have a pretty high withdrawal rate. It does come down in the early 70s, but then it starts to accelerate again as they age. And as we can see, we do end up with an income shortfall. And one reason we may be seeing an accelerating withdrawal rate as they age is because even though you have cost of living increase on Social Security, it may not be enough to keep up with things like normal inflation or even healthcare inflation. Note as well, we're only looking out to age 90 for both. So if one or the other ends up living past 90, this could become an even bigger issue. So let's see what happens with the assets themselves. And it's not too hard to tell what's going on. We can see that the investments themselves and the assets are kind of slowly depleting over time and then eventually running out before they hit age 90. But take a look at this. If you come back to age 70, imagine you retired at 62, you're retired for 8 years, you get to 70, and your $1 million portfolio has come down from $1 million all the way to 629. That's not exactly going to make you feel great about your situation. So even though Social Security is finally kicking in and we can kind of see the portfolio value level out, I think what we're starting to see as well is just an increase in the inflation and the costs of things that do tend to get more expensive as we age, probably just due to health care, certainly long-term care. And if we come look at the confidence of this here, two big things to notice that would cause concern right off the bat here. Number one is just the amount of dispersion that we see between the possible outcomes. And the second thing is this dark blue median line crashing down to 0 before we hit age 90. So looking at this particular confidence chart probably would not instill you with a whole lot of confidence. Now we just need to look and see, are there any adjustments? Are there any trade-offs that we can make to improve our outcomes? So let's head back over to our probability and our scenarios and see if there's anything that we can adjust. Now, to go back to a point before, that question of, well, can't they just turn on Social Security at 62? Won't that make things easier? Well, let's start there. Let's take a look and see what happens. So if we go ahead and we reduce Social Security strategy to taking it as early as possible, which would equate to age 62 for both of them, we see that we actually have a reduction and the probability of success on the Monte Carlo. And you might think, well, how's that even possible? They're turning on their Social Security. They don't have to touch their investments as much. Shouldn't that make things last longer? Well, again, we have to go back to this idea that even though you're turning Social Security on early, you're taking a very big pay cut to do that from age 62 to 70. I don't know if you can expect Social Security cost of living increases to actually keep up with normal inflation, let alone healthcare inflation. So what can happen, and we can kind of see that in the charts here with the blue being the original and the green now being taking Social Security early, we notice that we do get to hang on to more of our portfolio for longer, but it does start to dip down and then actually accelerates. And we see that we're no better off by taking it early than had we just waited until 67 and 70 respectively. And I think the reason that we see that is because when you delay Social Security, yes, you're not taking it for those few years up front, but there is an inflection point at which your lifetime Social Security payouts are actually higher by delaying than they are taking early. Now, obviously, your life expectancy has a lot to do with, is that actually going to be the case or not? But if you take a reduced Social Security benefit, you are delaying taking from your portfolio. And for a lot of folks, needing additional dollars for healthcare or long-term care later on means you're going to have to dip into your portfolio harder and for more years later on, which can accelerate that portfolio running out of money. And there can be a point where your portfolio simply just cannot produce enough income or return to support the additional ongoing needs. So let's come back and we'll change back our Social Security. And now somebody might say, well, what about the long-term care? I don't think I'm going to need it. I'm in good health. Let's get rid of it and see what happens. If we actually get rid of the long-term care, we can see that that does improve our probability of success from 15% up to 40%. Doesn't exactly make our confidence look all that much better. Our portfolio does have the potential to last a little bit longer or have more ending assets. But when you come back over here, I still don't think you're going to look at a 40% probability of success and feel warm and fuzzy inside. But really, an even bigger thing to point out is not factoring in long-term care costs at the end of your life is only something you would do at your own peril. When we look at the longtermcare.gov website, we see that someone turning age 65 today has almost a 70% chance of needing some type of long-term care services and support in the remaining years. And another thing to note is that on average, women need care longer than men at 3.7 years compared to 2.2. And imagine if you end up in a scenario where both of you need it. So not including long-term care cost assumptions feels like rolling an incredibly loaded dice, and it could come with some pretty painful possibilities. So what is it? What is going to make the difference when it comes to improving our outcomes? And at least in my experience, it's usually one of two things. The first, and this could be a deal breaker for a lot of folks, is going back to work. Having that steady paycheck, being able to save every penny that you can for perhaps the next 2 to 5 years is certainly something that can make a huge difference. And this is because if you are getting income from work and if you're still saving, you're not drawing on that portfolio, you're actually reducing the number of years that that portfolio is going to need to provide. And so in a lot of ways, that's going to help improve your odds because you have less years that you have to worry about markets treating you poorly. And if you can continue to save, that'll actually boost the value of the portfolio before you actually have to start drawing on it. So let's take a look. Let's say these folks are able to work until 65. That would get them right in line with Medicare age. Let's see what this does. And so bam, right off the bat, working an additional 3 years is going to give us a much higher probability of success, 89%. And now we're actually starting to see a median account balance I think that we can be happy with. So let's take a look at a comparison. And yeah, we can tell that by working an additional 3 years, not only are we going to have a much higher outcome score, we're also going to have a real potential to continue to grow assets through retirement. And a couple important things that does. Number one, it helps to make sure that you don't run out of money. Two, it may actually put you in a position where if a legacy is something that you want to have at the end of your life, well, now it's a lot more realistic to plan for that. We can also come over here and see that our withdrawal rates are a lot more attractive now. Yes, we do have a spike at the end of life that's going to be related to the long-term care cost, but at least the simulations are not giving us any income shortage at the end of this thing. Confidence is going to look a lot more confident. We have narrower dispersion. And again, that median line or that dark blue line in the middle here is staying positive all the way through end of life, age 90. Now, if working longer is not an option, then we have to figure out, is there anything else? So let's actually discuss the second thing that tends to have the biggest effect on projections, at least at this phase of somebody's life. And this is going to be changing expense assumptions. So if I reset this back and we go back to saying we're going to retire at 62, we're not going to mess with long-term care cost assumptions, we're not going to do Social Security early, well, what are the aspects of spending that we could adjust that might make a difference? So with a lot of analysis, it starts out where you look at a very set level of spending and then you kind of adjust that for inflation over time. But if you again look at something like the Bureau of Labor Statistics averages, a lot of folks do have a high level of spending when they first start retirement, roughly age 65. As they get older, that spending does dip down a little bit. Some of that may have to do with just completing all your bucket list items, doing all the travel that you could possibly do. Maybe you're just physically not able to travel anymore, and maybe that limits some of what you're going to be able to spend on. But then that leads to increased spending as you get even further out into your lifespan. That has a lot to do with increasing healthcare costs. And so this approach to spending assumptions is called the spending smile. And this is something that we can actually take a look at. So instead of having just a strict linear view of spending plus an inflation adjustment, if we were to say, well, let's do the spending smile, does that make a difference? Well, here, yes, we can see, and that's a pretty substantial difference. So if you have any flexibility in what you want to spend or can spend in retirement, spend a little bit more early on, pull back as you get a little bit further along into retirement, and then eventually expect to have higher spending just due to healthcare costs, that spending smile can help us to see a little bit of a better outcome. So we do at least see some increased assets at the end of the plan using the spending smile as compared to just the original plan. But let's take a look and see what our confidence chart shows us here. And again, we're seeing fairly wide dispersion on the possible outcomes, and we're seeing that median line dip once we get to that end of life and perhaps need to have those dollars for that long-term care. So I don't know if we come back over here and look at this probability of success and having looked at our confidence and saying, hey, I still feel really good about this particular scenario. So what we're also going to need to look at is going to relate to just regular spending. So $7,000 is clearly going to be too much. We could come down to $6,000 and we could leave alone our spending smile and see what happens here. And this gives us a much better outcome. 83% probability of success. Our median line is starting to show us in the positive when it comes to those projections of ending assets. Come over here to confidence. Hey, a lot tighter dispersion. Again, that dark blue line in the middle, that median, it is showing us positive value. We can feel a lot better about this than we can spending $7,000 with the spending smile. But bear in mind, there's still some flexibility that Joe and Jane are going to have to be able to have this type of probability outcome. Now, some of you might look at this and say, well, I'm still not comfortable. I want a higher probability of success. Maybe what's bothering you is the projection of that median account value still not being $1 million that you started with in retirement at 62. So what else can we do? Well, we could come back and alter our monthly spending again. What if we have something that is really close to that Bureau of Labor Statistics number that we talked about earlier, something like $5,500 per month plus the spending smile? Well, look at this. Now, all of a sudden, we have a much higher probability of success at 96. Our projected median account values at the end of life for age 90 are showing us 1.4 million. We can come over here and look at our confidence interval and feel pretty good, all right? This might be something that you look at and say, well, this is going to give me a lot more confidence. But notice there was a number of ways to try to get to this point. All of them required some flexibility. So in a perfect world, if you get to retirement, if you have more assets than you'll ever need, if you have no debt, if you have very low living requirements initially, that's kind of the recipe for a successful retirement. But even if you don't have those things, there can be things that you could adjust that could raise your projected outcomes, that maybe give you a bit more confidence. So at least in this example with Joe and Jane saying, hey, we want to retire at 62, it is possible. It doesn't look like they're going to have a high probability of success if they are dead set on spending that $7,000 per month. But if they have some flexibility, we can see that there is a chance that that spending flexibility, if they can show that, can give them a much higher probability of success and hopefully give them the confidence they need to make a decision. One final thought in all of this, I think people tend to fear the answers they're going to get when they look specifically at their finances, but knowing what's possible can change your life. And at least in the case of this example, they can have a very successful retirement if they're able to make some adjustments. And if you watched this video and kept thinking, hey, this is something that's been going through my mind a lot lately, consider if working with a licensed and experienced professional can help you get on track for your retirement. It may lead you down a successful path and hopefully give you some peace of mind. Once more, I'm Curtis Crossland, and if you want to see how we help folks build a more tax-focused and efficient retirement, be sure to check us out at www.subtlecrossland.com and subscribe for future videos.